Okay, and now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce the Superintendent of Lapeer County Schools. We're looking forward to having him answer all our questions, and I'm sure there are many, but he's just the man that can do it. We're going to start out this time, though, however. The Tea Party as a group has 4 or 5 questions that they wanted to ask that we've written down. And we're going to start out with answering those questions because that'll kind of open up the floor for others and give you thoughts on maybe questions you want to ask, okay? And then we'll turn it over to the audience and wait for the microphone because we stream this stuff. And ask any other questions that you have, okay? So again, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Wandrie, please.
Appreciate it. Thank you. You notice Tim didn't say you wanted to hear from me first. You just want to start asking questions right away. No such luck. You're going to hear the presentation first. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. I just wanted to thank Tim personally and the Tea Party leadership. This is my 8th year as superintendent in Lapeer Schools, and this has always been a very gracious audience to present to and get some feedback on some of our ideas in the school district. The last time I was here, I believe we were talking about security, school security and safety, and a lot of the issues that really are plaguing our society today that manifest themselves, unfortunately, in our local schools. And I'll have a brief update on how this plan, this vision, is going to impact school safety and security, and certainly that kind of blends in really well with what the opening topic was. So Senator Daley is here with us today. I want to thank him for coming to watch my presentation. He's very, very excited to more than likely endorse this plan, and he also threatened me that he has an opportunity to speak at the end of my presentation, that if I went too long, he was going to sneak out and leave early. So let's all keep a really close eye on and make sure he stays all the way through. I'm sure I'll pay for that later, but Kevin, always good to see you. I'm going to try and work the clicker here, and Bill, if it doesn't go all the way through, he'll help me out. But hey, there we go. First one worked. So we have a pretty ambitious plan we're about to embark on in the school system. Lapeer Community Schools is one of 5 local school districts in the county of Lapeer. We represent approximately 50% of this K through 12 student population in our county. We have a little less than 5,000 students. The remaining 5,000 students are divided amongst 4 local districts. And we have, like many other school districts in Michigan, been challenged with some downsizing in recent years. And I'll point to some demographic information that is indicative of why school districts are constricting and getting smaller in the state of Michigan. Particularly in Michigan and not necessarily in other states in the union, we're a declining population state, and as a result, government entities like school districts have got to figure out ways to operate more efficiently, reduce their footprint, provide a better product more efficiently, and that's what we hope to present to you today. What you're about to see is the result of over a year's worth of work, taking a look at where we're at demographically, financially, and most importantly, from an educational product perspective. Are we producing a good product? And I think we are, and you'll see evidence to prove that today. But beyond the current state of the district, we have to have an eye on the future, kind of looking down the road at what's coming, and have a plan in place to deal with those things that we're going to be faced and challenged with as a school district. Here's some demographic information. The Lapeer County birth rate has experienced a 20% decline in the last decade. These numbers here represent the number of live births in Lapeer County per year. And you can see a pretty sharp decline there since 1991. The most recent year we have data on is 2016, and we had less than 800 live births in Lapeer County. Why is this important for Lapeer Community Schools? Because on average, 36% of all children born in Lapeer ultimately become Lapeer Community School students. So as that birth rate trend continues, it doesn't look like it's going to change, and there's nothing that indicates that it will. The school district population will look very much like this. So our school district enrollment as of 2008 was almost 7,000 students at 6,861. We've had a 28% decline since 2008, and as I mentioned earlier, we are just under 5,000 students today. That represents $13 million in lost revenue since 2008. As many of you know, school districts in the state of Michigan are funded on a per pupil basis. So the more students you have, the more revenue you ultimately receive. The blue line is the loss of students in Lapeer compared to the state of Michigan. And the state of Michigan has declined in students 10.5% since 2008. Lapeer schools has more than doubled that decline. And I think for obvious reasons, Lapeer was hit particularly hard by the recession of 2007 and 8. Certainly when we closed Buick and Flint area, we're still dealing with the constriction of the big three, and that has definitely impacted our school district in significant ways. So right sizing, it's simply the right thing to do. So I want to take you through a little bit of a history of Lapeer. Very briefly, kind of buzz through this. This will be very redundant for some of you, but it's important to know before we talk about where we're going, where we've been as a district. In 1980, it was the peak of the district's population, and we were almost 9,000 students. And that's a monster school district, folks. That's bigger than present day, Grand Blanc, Davison, Lake Orion, Oxford, Clarkston. Lapeer was a very vibrant community in the late 70s and early 80s. As recently as 2004, we operated as 16 school buildings. Since 2007, when the bond was passed, we've seen enrollment decline 1,800 students, from 6,800 down to 5,000. And we annually budget for a loss of between 150 and 200 students a year, which represents about $1 million to $1.5 million in lost revenue annually. So we have a solid history of right-sizing the district as the population decreases commensurate with that. And this is just a real quick review of the closures, what some of the sinking fund dollars were used to fund. As we closed buildings in 04, 06, and 09, a lot of sinking fund dollars were used to close portable classrooms that were on the exterior of our buildings and to expand the existing facilities to make sure that they could fit the number of students that we had. I came here in 2011. We closed Seton and Maple Grove, and then in 14 we consolidated East and West high schools. The closure of those three buildings was an approximate savings of about $1 million a year in annual operations costs. Okay. At the time of the high school consolidation, we were right around 1,000 students in each high school, a little bit less than that at Lapeer West, and the buildings themselves were built to house around 1,500 students each. So, and we had Seton and Maple Grove at the time were probably about 50% full. So it was a good time to close those buildings and move on, and that problem and that challenge continues. The 07 bond was the first bond in 40 years in Lapeer Community Schools. 75% of that money was used to renovate Roland Warner and the Zemmer campuses. Under our current proposal, which you'll see in a few minutes, Roland Warner and Zemmer continue to house our middle-level age students in grades 5 through 8, and they're a big part of our future plan. Remainder of the bond funds in 07 were spent on other improvements and building upgrades. So from 04 to 09, sinking fund dollars that we used to consolidate the buildings, this is just a real quick glance at everything that was done. I'll leave this PowerPoint. It'll be available for the leadership here to disseminate, so I won't read to you all evening. But here's just a quick glimpse of what some of the dollars were invested towards. And since this is a kind of a key point, there's been no major investment in several of our buildings since 2004 and 2008. The merger of the high schools, as I mentioned earlier, definitely saved us significant dollars operationally. Since 2011, going on 8 school years, any maintenance or upgrades to our facilities, including transportation, so buying new buses when old buses time out, have all been paid for out of our general fund. We do not have a sinking fund or a bond to operate any of those costs. That's all come out of our general fund. So the cost of the status quo, I hear this question a lot. So Matt, we're hearing this talk about a potential bond proposal. You want to build a new high school. What if we just did nothing? What's the cheaper option? Okay? That's always a great question and always one that we have to be prepared to answer because you need to know. Maintaining our current facilities represents significant cost, not just now, but in the long term, and I'll speak to that in a bit. The majority of our current school buildings are 40 to 60 years old, and as I mentioned, the district does not have a current sinking fund to deal with some of those ongoing maintenance costs. And what are some of those things? Roofs, parking lots, boilers, things that just over time age and break down. And the increasing cost of safety, quite frankly, is weighing pretty heavily on the district. So when I started as a superintendent 8 years ago, and I mentioned this the last time I was here, safety and security relative to cost wasn't a real concern that many superintendents and school boards were confronted with dealing with. Now you're talking about hiring more personnel, hardening the targets of our schools, making it more difficult for bad guys to get in and do bad things. So for example, last school year, we had one full-time school resource officer and one full-time hall monitor in our secondary buildings. Fast forward this year, we have 3 full-time school resource officers, 3 full-time hall monitors whose only job is to secure the hallways at Rowan Warner, Zemmer, and the high school, and our Center for Innovation at West. So I'm sorry, 4 hall monitors in that case. We have also spent significant dollars to make each of the buildings a secured entrance, meaning you cannot get into the building unless you're buzzed in and have been visually seen and allowed to enter the building by a secretary or administrator. All of that comes at significant cost, but it's our parents and our community demands that because we certainly do not want to be on the news for not doing our due diligence to make sure these buildings are safe. So it just stands to reason the more buildings that you operate in a community school district, the more expensive it is to secure them into the future. So what are some of these ongoing operational and maintenance costs? These are real dollars. Cost of future maintenance at the current high school, the east site, CFI, the Old West, Zemmer, Rowan Warner, 3.5, 7.5, 1.5, 1.5 million. Below that are the annual operational costs. That's just what it costs to open the buildings, folks. Just open them, heating, lighting, and have kids come there every day. At this bottom line gives you the year that each of the facilities was built and when it was remodeled. These are all of our secondary facilities in the district. This next slide are all of our elementary facilities. We currently operate 5 elementary schools, and we have the old Irwin Elementary School is where the Central Office Administration is now housed. And you look at some of these future maintenance costs, pretty significant. All told, a little over $25 million that we've identified in maintenance costs that have to be done. And I'll show you some pictures of what I'm talking about. Roofs, boilers, parking lots, things that are really breaking down. I'm not talking about any aesthetic improvement to the building. I'm not talking about buying new computers and fancy additions to buildings. I'm talking about just bare bones stuff. So what are some examples? We'll fly through some of these pictures. Murphy Elementary boiler. Mayfield boiler. Some of this is the original equipment from 1957. Personally, I think we've done a heck of a job keeping it running that long. And part of the issue with some of these things, folks, is when you identify that and we have great maintenance staff that with preventative maintenance schedules and they're doing their best to repair it, is when you make the decision to spend the money to replace something like a boiler, if you close the building in 4 or 5 years because you don't have enough students to fill it, you can't take that boiler out and put it in a new building. It can't be a retrofit somewhere else. So that represents a fixed cost that's really lost money. So when we talk about some of these things as I flip through this, you really start to look at, do I want to spend $25 to $30 to $35 million on buildings that I know, based on the population decline, which I showed you in the first few slides, we're going to close. These buildings are going to close in the next 8 to 10 years. So we could certainly, I think, select the cheaper option, which is spending $25 million. What's problematic with that is I don't have the money, just don't have it, right? Knowing that we'll be closing these buildings in a few years. This is some pictures from the West building. So we've got some roof tar leaking through the ceiling. We've got some floors coming up. We don't have replacement tile. That's the original tile. They don't sell that color anymore, so we've slapped some yellow on there. There's some water damage and some plaster in the ceilings. And folks, we've got students. We have 800 students going through the Center for Innovation every day. This is not a building that's been boarded up that's not for use. We get the most out of our facilities. We have a great history in this district of doing more with less, but at a certain point, you have to deal with the law of diminishing returns. These buildings are old, they break down, and they require maintenance, and that's the challenge that we face right now. You look at this as a door with significant rust, and this is kind of leading to the bowels of the building where some of the heating and cooling units are. The amount of standing water and the moisture in the air has led to a lot of degradation of the piping system. And some of these pictures are hard to see, but a lot of standing water in a lot of these places despite repairs. Rusting through of our outdoor refrigeration units. That's the bottom of one of those units, completely rusted out. Roof leaking because you got about an inch gap here of separation on the tar. That's the liner of the entire roof. So definitely some issues there you can see to the physical plan of some of these buildings. So you couple all that together, you look at a couple different variables. So you've got declining enrollment, which is a fact, all right, and that is in line with the declining population of the county and our state. As a result, school districts get less revenue. We're not the first and only district in Michigan to close schools. It's happening in communities all around us. Farmington closed a high school this year. Lake Orion closed elementary school last year. Flint's down to one high school. Saginaw's down to one high school. It's happening all over. So it really is incumbent on each individual community to look at the set of variables that they're challenged with, and they got to come up with solutions. So when I have been in the community the last couple of months, really just kind of field testing some of this data. So really just sharing this information with people and asking them what they think. I've talked to over 600 people in our community. That includes students, that includes staff, business owners, elected officials, alumni, business owners, groups like yourself, and just said, here's the data, here's some of what we're thinking about how to deal with it, and what do you think is a good solution to that. So in collecting all that information, we're getting close to kind of finalizing what the plan would be, and I am going to take this plan to our board, and they've been working with us along the way, but hopefully by the end of next month, we'll be able to promote an actual finalized plan. What I'm going to show you today is just very briefly a couple of the options that have been considered along the way. So how do you deal with this issue? Because not dealing with it really isn't an option. You can't look at the state of some of these facilities. You can't look at the fact that we're losing students and just say, well, I really hope everything goes away. It's not going to happen. I've closed 3 schools in my 8 years, and we're going to close more. So what's a better, more proactive way to look at how we do business? But I first want to share with you about 5 minutes real quickly about how things have improved in Lapeer schools in the last 8 years. Just by a show of hands, how many of you are Lapeer graduates? About half the room. How many have had a student, or your children went to Lapeer, or have grandchildren in the district right now? Okay. So almost everybody has some connection to the district, either personally or through your children or grandchildren, right? So, I always say this every time I present, but a school district, especially in a community like Lapeer, is the epicenter of any community. It means a lot to us, and it should mean a lot to us. We should have pride in it, and we should know about what are the good things that our local school district is doing to educate our community, our community's youth, but also what are some of the challenges they face. Listen, I've only been here for 8 years. Lapeer has a very long history that predates me, and there have been mistakes made, there have been successes, and I hope that in my time here I can at least leave the district in a better place than which I found it. And I want to share with you some of the things that I think we've done in the last 8 years that not only financially, but academically, instructionally, that have been sound and that have proven successful. So our One Lapeer campaign to merge the high schools has really been seen statewide as a model for consolidation. I, as a superintendent, was fortunate enough to lead that process, have been asked to speak throughout the state on other communities that have multiple high schools who are considering consolidation about what we did and why it worked so well. From the time we announced the merger of the 2 high schools to the actual date of opening Lapeer High was less than 18 months, okay? We did that campaign, saved over $1 million of operational costs, and didn't ask our community for $1, right? There are many communities who actually have to pass a bond to consolidate high schools because they want to renovate and add onto an existing facility, and I have several examples. one of which was Bloomfield Hills Schools, which 8 years ago, my entire central office team and I spent one day there. It took that community 10 years to merge their high schools because there was that much consternation in the community about which school building they were going to use, what the school colors were going to be, what's the mascot going to be, you know, how much money we're willing to spend, is it time to do it, isn't there a better way, and a lot of hand-wringing, and I think they went through 2 or 3 superintendents along the way to get to finally actually consolidating. Well, I'm happy to say that I survived our consolidation. It was a difficult time, but it was a necessary step, I think, in proving to the community that we don't need to come and ask you for money every time we want to make a change. Okay? Lapeer has a really, really solid history, I said earlier, of doing more with less, and I think that's a good thing, and that's a good attribute because we always look at solutions that don't necessarily involve spending more money. But there are certain times, and we have to admit that, much like the address that was made at the beginning of today's meeting, that, yeah, we'd like to have a free solution to this really challenging problem that our nation faces, but to a certain degree, we have to recognize it's going to cost money, right? It's going to take resources, and we're no different. But the one high school merger is something that our town should be really proud of, and I certainly was proud to be a part of it. We have grown our community partnerships. We, for the first time ever in our school district's history, have an academic and athletic foundation. This group raises literally hundreds of thousands of dollars a year through fundraising to augment and supplement programs for our students and staff that we don't have as part of the general fund. This is a group of just concerned and organized citizens who's made it their mission to give back to the kids of the Lapeer community. They take grant requests from teachers. They give money to coaches in different programs. They give out scholarships to students. They have award ceremonies where they're recognizing kids both on the athletic fields of competition and in the classroom. It's a tremendous organization. We've never had an academic foundation in the history of our district, and these folks came to me. We started it 4 years ago, and they've done tremendous things. We have significantly grown our college and university relationship. We now have students that, as high school students, take classes at Mott, Baker, U of M Flint, and Eastern Michigan, many times at no cost or at very little cost to our families. I know we have a couple of you who are parents in here who are benefactors of that programming. I think, Bill, your daughter went to school at Alma as a sophomore, right? She had so many credits. It was great. 28 credits out of high school, going into your freshman year of college, paid for by your local school district. In 2010, there was 12 students in the entire district of Lapeer schools, between East and West high schools, that got dual enrollment credit through a local college through our system. This year, we have over 400 kids who are getting college credit because of these relationships. So when we talk about that diploma and being in Lapeer schools actually making a tangible difference in the lives of families, that's actual money you can take to the bank. That we've saved families money and we've added value to their lives. We've had historic growth on our K-8 assessments. Did you realize that Schickler and Murphy elementary schools have been identified as 2 of the top performing elementary schools in the entire region of Southeast Michigan? Both of those schools were just recently called reward schools by the Michigan Department of Education. Our MSTEP proficiency scores are nearly double the next best district in a 2-county area. Our growth on a student's scoring, K through 8th grade, is nearly double that of every district in Genesee and Lapeer County. That is real, tangible growth. Here's a great example of it. When we look at our tested areas on the MSTEP, which is the Michigan standardized test that we use to see and determine comparing Lapeer to other schools in the state, if you look at all of our tested students in the state of Michigan, their average, about 37% of those students are proficient on the exam. We started at 30%, which was not very good in 2015. 4 short years later, we are at 42%. Look at that trend line. That is the direction of our district on student achievement. So we're very, very proud of that, and this is the first time in the history of our school district where we can say that the trend line over 4 straight years is outpacing the state, and will outpace the state by double digits by the end of this tested year. We're very proud of that, and we're going to keep continuing to get better. More academic options, more participation. I've talked about this, but here's an exhaustive list of things that we've added in the last 8 years. Virtual learning for kids, early college program. The early college program, folks, we have students that can go to high school for 5 years. At the end of that time, they have the option of graduating with an associate's degree in college and a high school diploma paid for by Lapeer Community Schools. We have that partnership, Baker and Mott. It is absolutely tremendous. We have dozens and dozens of kids that take advantage of that. So they have chosen to forego their actual high school graduation a year because they want to put another year in and have their 2-year college degree. It's an awesome program. We have a partnership with our homeschool communities. We started a program 4 years ago where we offer some courses to homeschool families. We started out with 8 students. Now we're over 150 homeschool students who get some of their education through Lapeer schools. We are one of less than 10 school districts in the entire state of Michigan that offers a homeschool partnership. There's over 800 school districts in the state of Michigan, folks, and there's 10 or fewer in the state that offer outreach to homeschool partnership people, and we're one of them. We're very proud of that. Our athletic complex renovation, we built a brand new athletic complex at the west site, which included a new track, a new football field, resurfaced tennis courts, baseball and softball, a renovated gymnasium at the east site, a new wrestling room. It cost over $3 million, and we got every single dime of it fundraised. Every dime of it. Didn't ask the community for a cent. We went out there to different organizations, and they raised the money for us. And again, you got a state-of-the-art. We went from some of the poorest athletic facilities in the region to some of the premier. This football complex and baseball, softball, tennis court, track and field is one of the premier sites in the region. And we have to be proud of that. We now are able to host statewide band competitions, regional track competitions. We host district and regional playoff football games, district and regional baseball and softball contests. So our athletes now have a really great place to compete and participate, and we know there's a lot of community pride around athletics. And this is the last one I want to talk about, but this is my favorite one. Every single year, the Michigan Department of Education produces an independent document that compares how school districts in Michigan spend money in relative comparison to each other. So as I mentioned, there's over 800 school entities in the state of Michigan. Lapeer Community Schools is in the top 9% of districts in the state for efficiency in business administration and operational and maintenance costs. So what that means is that we're in the top 9% of how we efficiently spend our money. We're not top heavy. We don't have too many administrative staff. And the money that we do have for business and operations costs is spent in a very efficient manner. Here's the next best thing. We're in the top 29% in the state for investment into the classroom, money that goes directly to kids. We are not wasting money on big buildings. We're not wasting money on a ton of overheads, administrative staff, or business and operations costs. We're putting our money where our mouth is in the classroom. I don't produce these numbers. This is an independent document produced by the MDE. But in my time here as superintendent, those numbers have been very consistently in that same spot. It's actually improved a little bit. Right? So when you hear people say things like, those school districts waste money, is that true to a certain degree in some places? Yep. Not here. What is that school district doing for our kid? I just gave you a host of reasons to say, here are some tangible benefits that our kids in this community get just because they live in Lapeer. And these are opportunities that they're not getting in neighboring school districts because we have really put an emphasis on making that experience in Lapeer a valuable one. Not just, hey, here's high school, here's elementary school, it's one size fits all, good luck, hope you make it through. Right? Education is changing, it's becoming much more personalized. Technology is changing everything. And school does not look the way it did when I went there or the way it did when you went there. Right? It's becoming a much more personalized environment. We're trying to figure out what each individual student needs and try to provide an opportunity for them to go to school in that way. All right, so what are some of the right-sizing proposals? I've got about 6 or 7 minutes to get through this, and then I'll open it up for questions. You've been so patient. I appreciate it. But I hope you can appreciate that this is a complex thing. When you're talking about a school district that has 5,000 students, we have 700 employees, some 10,000 plus parents. This is the largest community school district in an entire county. This is not something that you can just come in and give a 6-minute presentation, although I know Kevin would appreciate it if I did give a 6-minute presentation. It takes a lot, so I appreciate your patience. I know people want to just dive into questions, but there's so much background information. I don't want to take for granted and assume that you know all this stuff. And so it's an opportunity for me to share with you some of the things that if you don't have a child or grandchild in the district right now, you might not know. But what are some of the things we consider? Our initial proposal given the declining enrollment, given the condition of the buildings, looked like this. We wanted to convert the Roland Warner campus into what we called an early childhood center. So all kiddos, like early fives, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, put them all in that Roland Warner facility. Grades 3 through 5 at Zemmer. We would maintain our year-round program at the Turtle site, which, as you know, has been a year-round program for the past 6 years now. We would have a middle school, convert the current high school at the east site into a middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and then we would build a new high school campus at the west site. We had to put some idea on paper to say, this is what we're considering. Now, in this plan, it would call for the closure, right, of the remaining buildings that you don't see. So Schickler, Murphy, Mayfield, and Lynch would be closed, consolidated, and marketed for sale. Okay? This was the original plan. So what we did was we met with, I met with 7 different focus groups. And Bill, you were part of one of them, right? About 15 to 20 people each. We asked them to kind of to mull this over, to ask questions, to poke holes in it, tell us what you didn't like, ask lots of questions. They changed it. It kind of morphed. Then we went to much larger groups of about 50 or 60 people, took the same proposals and gave it to that group. They chewed it up. They changed it. Then I took the plan to different alumni groups in our staff. I took it to various service organizations like Rotary and Kiwanis and the Optimist Club, different community groups. We had more I went to all the parent committees, so each building I went to the PTCs and the PTOs and the PACs and all the other alphabet soup of organizations and the athletic boosters, and just talked to different people about the plan and got all these opinions. All told, about 600 people had a chance. The plan looks nothing like this now, but that's indicative of the process we went through to let people chew on it and change it, and because really we want it to be reflective of what people think is the best option. So we boiled it down to these 2 options, okay, and it's going to change again. But we had in option 1 here on the left, we had the Early Childhood Center at Schickler, which was early 5s and kindergartners. We were going to have a lower elementary campus at Zemmer, which was going to be grades 1, 2, and half of 3rd grade. The other half of 3rd grade, grades 4 and 5, would then go to Roland Warner. Again, grades 6, 7, and 8 would be at the east site, or the current Lapeer High School, and a new high school would be constructed at the west site. That was option 1. Option 2 said, okay, we're going to do the same thing over here at option 1 with the Early Childhood Center at Schickler. We were going to have grades 1 and 2 at Zemmer, because folks didn't like this idea of splitting up 3rd grade. Have grades 3 and 4 at Roland Warner, grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 at Lapeer Middle School at the east site, and again, keep the high school campus at Lapeer West site. So those were the 2 options. We talked to over 100 people about these 2, and then we got an idea that was sent to us by one of our community members after the focus groups and said, hey, what do you think about this new idea? So after talking to like 500 people and thinking that these are the 2 options, and then to have someone email me the next day and say, what do you think about this idea? I half thought about deleting the email because it was a really good idea, and I knew I'd have to go back out there and ask people. So I did a YouTube video. I sent it back out to everybody that participated in the focus groups, and I said, okay, folks, we got a new idea. What do you think? And we had an overwhelming positive response for this new idea. So what I'm about to show you is more than likely probably going to be the option that we go with. The reason I show you all of this is because I don't want you to assume that what I'm about to show you was the original option that came out of the gate, right? It's not. But I like it. It's a result of, like I said, about 600 people looking at it. So I think it's a pretty good plan. All right, so at the top, we have the school or the site. The grade level. Then we have the site, the projected student population at each building, and the grade level that it will house, and then the renovation requirements at each building to get it done. For the Early Childhood Center, we have chosen the Turtle facility over Schickler because Turtle is our most recently renovated elementary school. It's in really good shape. So our youngest learners, early 5 and kindergartners, will all start their Lapeer Community Schools experience together at one site. Then we have what we're going to convert the current East Campus into Lapeer Elementary School. That will house grades 1 through 4. So all of our kindergarten kiddos will leave Turl together and become first graders at Lapeer Elementary School at the same time. We're going to have a 5th and 6th grade intermediate school at Rowan Warner. We are going to have a 7th and 8th grade middle school at Zemmer. And the new Lapeer High School, grades 9 through 12, would be housed at Lapeer High, at the west site. Some of the benefits of this plan is that when you look at the previous plans, you'll notice that almost every single facility that was slated for one of these eventual sites had to be renovated. So right now, Zemmer and Rowan Warner are middle schools. They're built for middle school students. If I converted them to an elementary age building, I'd have to put a lot of money into it, right? Schickler is a building that's falling into significant disrepair. It's got electric heat there, as an example, which is about twice as expensive as regular heat, right? So I would have to renovate Schickler. Obviously, I have to renovate East to convert it from a high school facility into a middle school one, and then obviously the major renovation is going to happen at West. So my initial concern with this, although I liked it, was that's a lot of money because we're really touching every one of these buildings. When this new plan came in, if you look down here, it talks about the renovation requirements. No renovation at Rowan Warner and Zemmer. Those buildings can really exist and function as is. That's the age level they currently serve. Some minor renovations at the Turl Center, and the only reason that's going to happen is because when you have an early 5 classroom, there are some legal requirements you have to meet, like temperature-controlled rooms. They have to have restroom facilities inside the classroom. So some minor upgrades, but nothing that's too substantial, right? Some moderate renovations of the East Campus, because for all intent and purposes, the East site is a pretty sound facility, right? We've got some things we need to work on. It probably need a new roof. Probably going to change out some of the heat exchange units. We've got to convert some of the classroom spaces. For example, I'm not going to have a metals and a wood shop at an elementary school. So I can convert some of that space into actual classroom space. So, but that's moderate, and obviously a substantial portion of the bond that we would raise would have to go to build the new high school at the west site. But all told, this is a much cleaner option in terms of where the grade levels end up. And quite frankly, our elementary staff is the most excited about having our entire elementary population housed in 2 buildings. The east site sets up very well to have those 4 grade levels dissected into pods. So for example, all of our first graders would be in one area of the building. Second graders in another end, third in another end, fourth in another end, right? So you wouldn't have 1,200 elementary kids running around with their hair on fire. We probably wouldn't have a principal there very long. I don't think so. So that's the plan as we're working through it right now. So why have we yet to announce this publicly? Because we have to give our final plan and idea to the architects, to the construction management team, and they are trying to cost out the best solution for us. And I'll be honest, it's a little bit of a negotiation, right? If you're an architect, you want to build it big and pretty. When you're a superintendent, you want to build it plain and functional, right? Because I'm looking at the bottom line, they're looking at, this artistic project. I know our community very well. I've been here with the microphone at a lot of different events, a lot of different initiatives. I know what our town wants. I know what our kids need. We're going to build a great high school, and when this plan is done, we're going to have a 50-year pathway for this district. Rowan Warner and Zemmer are recently renovated as of 2007. They're beautiful facilities. Thank you very much, Lapeer, for supporting that. We'll have a renovated elementary facility. Turl is our most recently renovated elementary building, and a brand new high school. The 5 primary buildings our kids go to school, other than operational maintenance costs, upgrades, and general care, will not have to be renovated in any significant way for the next 50 years. Okay? In my mind's eye, that's putting the school district in a much better place and much better trajectory for us having committed to this plan. Okay? So what is the cost? What does it look like? I don't know yet, but we have some idea, and I want to share with you where we're at. Right now, we currently, let me click fast forward to this one. This is the financial investments in our peer districts. What is a peer district? A peer is not necessarily your neighbor. Dryden and Lapeer schools have nothing in common other than we live right next door. But from a school district perspective, they're about 500 kids. We're at 5,000 students. There's not a whole lot of comparables you can draw between the two districts. So we look at districts and communities that are very similar to us, some in Oakland, some in Genesee County. This is the total levy in mills that these districts collect for operational maintenance, sinking funds, bonds, whatever they currently levy. And you look at Lapeer here at 2.8 and Davison at 2.3 are by far the lowest. This is the total amount of money raised in recent bonds between these, how many we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 school districts, including Lapeer. So this is just a good frame of reference. These are very similar districts, very similar communities of Lapeer, and they're levying significantly more on an annual basis for their districts than is Lapeer. We have proposed, if we had a $75 million bond at 24 years, basically 24 and a half years, an increase in debt levy of 1.45 mils, and an annual cost to the average homeowner based on our current SEV, which is about $74,000, a state equalized value, would be about a $109 increase on an annual basis. At $125 million over 24 years, it's an increase in debt levy of about 3.5, annual increase to homeowner of about $263 a year, and in the middle is the $100 million option. Where do I think we'll be? I am negotiating hard to be below 100 and above 75, somewhere in the middle. What we're looking at right now is a range of cost anywhere between $11 and about $15 a month to the average homeowner in Lapeer to pass this bond over 24 years. And that would accomplish everything that I just mentioned. Okay? So the challenge is messaging that to people, having them understand the challenges that we currently face financially in the district, and what are the benefits of migrating towards a plan like this, and why do we feel like it's the best thing educationally and financially for the district. Okay? We, as I said earlier, did a lot of homework. Okay? I know every single dollar spent in this district since 2004. Every dime on every building, what it was designed for, when it was exhausted, when it was spent, and why. Every dime. I'll give you a couple of examples. In 2004, we spent a little over $300,000 on Mayfield Elementary School to remove asbestos from the building and the ceiling tiles. We have not put a dime into that building since then. Okay, other than some district Wi-Fi and some normal ongoing operational maintenance, but no major renovation of that building in 15 years. Okay, I have dozens of examples like that I can say that this district has done a really good job, not in everything, because we've got our warts like everybody else, but of pinching pennies and really getting the most out of these facilities. And we're at a crossroads right now, and we just have to ask our community, can you support us in this bond? It will be the second bond in about 45 years for the district, which is, I don't think, asking a significant amount when you compare us to some of our peers, right? And I don't necessarily support this, guys. Looking at some of these numbers are pretty gaudy. And I'm not going to point to particular districts, right? I think it's incumbent upon local government entities to demonstrate sound fiscal management, so when we do require money, the community's citizens are more apt to listen to the plea. Because in 8 years, I have never come to this community for a sinking fund or a bond, and we have closed 3 schools and created a much better academic program than was left to us. And that we're very proud of. I want to continue that, but I have to be honest with you in the reality that we're currently facing, and that's why I'm here today. So that really concludes the presentation, and with that, I know, Tim, you said that the board had some questions first, and then we'd open it up to the general public.
Nice job, Matt. Very good. Well, I think he answered a lot of our questions, but we probably still have a few.
Coming out tonight?
Yeah. No. Bill, do you have any other questions on the... Yes, he did. Very nice.
folks, we were wondering class sizes. What is the average under this, with this, what's the average class size? Of course, we know elementary is going to be a little different than high school.
Yep.
But what are the proposed class sizes that you're thinking would be for the various
That's a really good question, and one that the next time I give this speech, I'm just going to add that in there because everyone asks it. Class size minimums and maximums are contractually negotiated between the teachers union and the school district, right? So like you said, typically the lower grade levels, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, have a lower class size average. In grades 1 through 5, our current district average is right around 27 students a classroom, and it's closer to 30 with middle school and high school students, which is pretty close to state averages. As you begin to reduce the number of students per classroom, costs go up significantly. We don't spend a lot of time, quite frankly, Bill, debating changing our current levels because there's not a lot of solid data that really leads to reduced class sizes automatically equate to increased student achievement. There's one research study from the 70s that indicated that if you get to a ratio of 18 students to 1 teacher, you can really start to see some significant growth. But anything plus or minus 2 or 3 from that, you're not really seeing that measurement. 18 students per classroom is not a legitimate goal for us to achieve based on our current funding levels. That being said, at the secondary level, education looks a lot different in 2019 than it did even 10 and 15 years ago. And elementary education is going to look very similar because of the grade level. They require a lot of hands-on. The older our kids get, the more mobile they're becoming. Here's a good stat. In 2018, 25% of our seniors at Lapeer High School only went to the high school for 1 or fewer classes a day. 25%. So 1 in 4 kids was at the building not at all or for only 1 class. That number is growing. Why? Because students are doing things like ed tech, co-op. They are dual enrolling. They're taking online courses. They're working. They have enough credits by the end of their first semester to be able to graduate early and start a track of their career. So when you start talking about building facilities, it's not necessarily about total number of kids divided by the class size equals X number of classrooms. It's about learning spaces, opportunities. We're talking right now about designing a cafeteria that doesn't look like a cafeteria, that it's got seating for kids to sit down and plug their devices in and kind of come and go as they want pretty much all day, you know, because their schedules are so different. We've got students that spend the first 2 hours at MOP, then show up at school at 10:30, right? We've got students that start the day at 7:30 in the morning and are done by noon, and all manner of options in between. So the mobility of the older students kind of determines that the site you build is going to look a little bit different. But the averages are right around 27 and a little above 30 for the high school students.
Okay. And there's one more here. I apologize here. Let's see. What is the time frame for changing schools as far as how long would this take?
Yes.
From it was passed, how long is the changeover going to take, and what's that going to look like?
Really good question. And this is something that, unlike the high school merger that seemed like it happened overnight, and it literally did, this we have to allow for more time. So if we're successful in a bond campaign this coming November, we would not open the new school system set up until 2022-23 school year, because the construction is a minimum of 2 years, they're telling us, right? So the logistics of transitioning all the kids, of figuring out when to do like the upgrades at the east site, and how to move all the staff, that we have plenty of time, 3 full school years actually, to deal with all the logistics.
And let's see, at another, it was brought up that at another meeting, it was brought up that in the next 5 years, modern educational concepts like computer, audio, visual, virtual communications, and such may nullify the need for the ratio. It may require less teachers, you know, on site. let's see, for the brick and, do you see that having any effect on the amount of teachers we're going to have? Are we doing, when we do our classes, our virtual learning, for example, because a lot of people may not know what that is. Yeah. Do we do that all on site? Do we do? I know a friend of mine. He goes to school, and his kids go to school in Holly, and their virtual learning is all online. They don't go to a building
at
like
all.
I know. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's really it's a combination of the two. So, for example, if you have a freshman student that takes an online course, the parents may say, well, I'm not leaving junior home at 8 in the morning to get online. I'd prefer if he can come to school and be in an online environment, which you may have, let's say, 100 students in a computer lab with one teacher who's kind of monitoring the kids. Now, that's one option. You've got some older students, juniors and seniors who can drive, who have already, been traveling because of dual enrollment, or they're ed tech students that say, well, I don't want to have to come to school. I can take my online course at my own pace, and they're allowed to do so. So it's really, how does that inform the building process? It informs it a lot, because 20 years ago, if you said, I got 1,500 high school students, you're going to build a building that houses 1,500 kids, and those 1,500 bodies are going to be in that building a majority of the day, 7:30 to 2:30. So when we're looking at our population of around 1,400, functionally speaking, we'll probably only have between 1,000 and 1,200 kids at the building at any given time, given the amount of mobility. So it does inform that process.
Okay. Transportation. How is the the proposed, once we get, provided this goes through, what differences in transportation? I believe Lapeer still uses a 3-tier, where they have 3 different times and bus runs, and there was talk a couple years ago about going to a 2-year or a 2-tier. Yes. What are the plans going forward for that with this new building alignment?
Yeah, great question. We are going to go to a 2-tier system, and we desire to keep our elementary students on one run and our secondary students on another. And that's, I think, a parental preference as well. And a lot of districts do K-12 or K-8 busing. We have a very, very large school district from a geographical perspective. Lapeer Schools is a little over 225 square miles, making us one of the largest districts area-wise in the Lower Peninsula. And we have a standard we like to keep, that we don't want any young person on the bus, especially in the afternoon, longer than an hour. That may sound like a long time, but folks, it's a 20-minute bus ride from downtown Lapeer at the bus garage just to get to Murphy Elementary School on a bus, the southern touch point of our district. 20 minutes on a bus without making one stop, right? So we've got a lot of stops to make. So we're going to save some money going from a 3-tier to a 2-tier. And what we've done with this plan, Bill, I don't know if anybody noticed this, but essentially we have every single elementary age student on what side of town? East side. All the elementary age kids are a building that's Turtle and East are really close to each other, and all the secondary age students are on the west side of town. That was done very purposefully. So if we're going to pick up all the elementary kiddos at one time, not having to cross M24 to get anybody else saves about 10 to 15 minutes per bus run. So when we were at Schickler and some at Turtle and some at Rowan Warner and Zemmer and kind of all over, it really was wreaking havoc on our schedule. So when this plan came out, I showed it to our transportation director, and she said, this is the one. If you want shorter bus runs and I can keep us at 2-tier, this is it. So, transportation in a district of this size is sometimes the tail that wags the dog. When I came here 8 years ago, we did a community survey. And one of the questions we asked was, can you rank order the services the district provides that you find the most value in? 98% of people in this community said, whatever you do, don't mess with transportation. Now, I wasn't a math teacher, but when 98% of people say don't do something, don't do it. All right, so people value transportation because of the proximity of where they work. If you work in Flint and you've got a kid down in the south end of the district, that is a very challenging thing, all right? So transportation is a really big part of this. So we're happy to finally get away from that 3-tier system, but it's because we're reducing the number of buildings.
Gotcha, okay. And the last question we had was, what is Lapeer School's policy on the practice of Common Core with the students?
Relative to what?
Just, is it fully implemented? How much, because there's a lot of concern with folks, some of the things. how does Lapeer Schools implement it? Is that something you might want to let people know? You know, what a lot of people say, well, we don't want to hear it.
Sure.
How much can the district do or not do to enforce the time?
Part of the issue is, and I've been on both sides of this debate, quite frankly. You know, I used to be a high school principal, and then I was a human resource director, and so responsible for staffing, and now as a superintendent. When I was a teacher, I wasn't too thrilled about the Common Core. When I was teaching, that's when the Common Core really started to come out and emerge as a really key national issue. And really what it started as is a carrot to the race to the top. You know, so it was the Governors Association at the time, which was pretty right-leaning at the time. I think at the time it came in 30 to 39 governorships that said we want to adopt this Common Core because it was also a requirement to submit to get race to the top money in the Obama administration. So there was a lot of consternation about the chicken or the egg. Was it the Governors Association that was a kind of a conservative-leaning group that was pushing for a common curriculum across the states, or common standards, I should say, or was it the states responding because they were trying to get this money? Okay, you know, to me as a school as a superintendent, when I first started this job, I used to spend a lot of time in Lansing because you know I thought it was making a big difference. No offense, Kevin. But there's a lot of turnover in Lansing, right? You know, term limits have had some unintended consequences trying to develop relationships with people, and quite frankly, I just don't spend as much time on the lobbying end as I did when I first started because I would rather spend my energy and limited time and resource here in Lapeer just making the decisions I know that have an impact. So from a school district perspective, what the feds are going to decide is a requirement versus what the state's going to decide oftentimes are out of our control, right? So when the state tests and the achievement metrics are built around the common set of standards, and then our school district is judged, rightly or wrongly, based on our students' ability to perform on those achievement metrics, you can look at it one of two ways. You can say, well, you know what, those achievement tests and those metrics and those comparisons aren't for us, so we're going to opt out, which has a number of consequences. Or you can say, we'll take the common set of standards, we'll adapt it to what we think is best for kids locally, right? So we can best prepare them for things like the M-STEP, like the PSAT, like the ACT, like the SAT. Okay. So the latter is the track that we have chosen to take. So in Lapeer schools, like many districts, we have board policy that dictates any new curriculum adoption. So we have to make that public. There has to be X amount of meetings that the community has an opportunity to review any materials that we put in front of kids. I can't just secretly buy a book and put it in front of kids without getting approved by the board. Right? So there's checks and balances locally to Common Core. If there are things that you find that are at cross purposes with the local values, you still have locally elected board members who can say, you know what, this particular piece is not for us. And we've done that here. There have been a number of things that have been recommended to us. So the idea that we've lost control locally really is a misnomer. We still have board policy that says we can't just adopt curriculum unilaterally, despite the fact that the feds have established common standards.
Okay. All right, that was all on our list.
Maybe. No, I want to give it back to you. We've talked, and I'm real concerned economically with and I want to address some of the demographics that you talked about. As you know, I've walked door to door on certain things, and it appears to me that approximately 37 to about 40% of this population in Lapeer are aged in the mid-50s to retirement age, senior citizens to retirement age. There's a certain segment of the society that, I'm sure you've studied the demographics on this, that are earning livings outside the community and bringing their income back to this area because it has what they call a low tax base, and they find that this is a more reasonable place to live. And then the other segment of the society that encompasses, especially here in Mayfield Township, to the north, and where Kevin lives, large tracts of land which are farmlands. So my question is this: recognizing all these these demographics. Do you agree with those demographics, by the way?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, that's my
They
feeling.
are what they are.
They-
Not a lot of debate.
Well, and then the question is, on a millage proposal like this, one other issue is we know that we've lost a lot of student population, and those graduates who have graduated from the high school, where have they gone? They don't stay here in Lapeer. So the voting population that we have is basically the same segment of society, the retirees, suffering. Is this an economically feasible plan?
Let's just go to the numbers. Okay, I can't get it much lower than that. Okay, and it's a great question. And demographics are there as something to inform this process, not to be a barrier to it, right? And part of the reason, twofold, that I have not come to this community prior to this, 8 years into my tenure as superintendent, is everything you just said, right? Everything you just said, I wholeheartedly agree with. And number two is I felt we owed it to the community to demonstrate in measurable ways that we have taken actionable steps to reduce our operational costs, reduce the footprint of this district, and prove to you that we don't believe in wasteful spending, and that if and when we do come to you and say, you know what, we need a little extra money, that you would have at least something to say, you know, these guys aren't coming to us every other year, like many of the districts up here, right? And that's how they do business. I'm not judging them. And say, you know, every time there's a failed bond, we'll go back out next November, or we'll go out in May, or we'll go out next August, right? So when I'm telling you that I think I got a plan that for 50 years has this district on a track for sustainability, doubling our levy and still below every single district on this chart except for one, I think the answer to that question is unequivocally yes. I think it's a fiscally sound plan. And I wouldn't do it if I thought otherwise. Okay.
Based upon the demographics in this community.
Well, I answered that because I said you're right. Yeah. So how do we demonstrate to people that are older that don't have kids in school or grandkids that this is valuable?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the answer?
Well, it's an investment in the future. I understand that.
Those are your words.
Right.
What do you think? If you're up here with the mic and you've got to sell what you believe to be you said it. These are your words. It's a fiscally responsible plan. Right. How do we do it? I want your advice. I'm asking for your advice.
Well, I think it's a hard sell. Is what I'm saying.
It's a hard sell. Yeah. So that doesn't mean don't do it.
I'm just saying it's a hard sell. If it's based
Thanks, Matt. Hi, I'm Dan Winuk, and this is my first attempt here really to understand this forum better, and I appreciate all the information you've shared with us. And I can respond to this gentleman's concern here. I can mention that I'm third generation product of Lapeer Community Schools. My kids have also gone through the school. My mother actually was Dairy Queen back in 1963 at Lapeer High School, and my grandfather had a lot of notables, but really what this comes down to is we have to take a look at all the multiple factors that brought us to this point. We've been through a couple difficult economic downturns, especially the 2007 one. And we have a large blue-collar population here, and we're more rural in our environment. And I do work outside the city. My wife works inside the city. She has 2 jobs. But my travels with my job take me to many different areas around Metro Detroit. And we are literally at a crossroads where we're fighting competitively with other school districts. And if there's one thing I hear resoundingly down south of us is a lot of people want to move north. They want to have land. They want to build in different areas. And there is some new building up this way that we have not seen in a long time. But it really comes down to another factor, and that is, what is it that these investments bring into the community? And I can tell you with proof that the new sports complex was and is continuing to be a huge success. I am treasurer of the Lapeer Band Boosters, and we hosted our second invitational at the sports complex last fall. We almost tripled the number of guest bands coming to visit us, where we had almost 1,500 people attend the event. And as I was milling around the crowd, I kept hearing comments from people from far away as Grosse Pointe and as far out beyond Flint saying, wow, I never knew this was here in Lapeer, look at this. And they were really generally shocked, especially people that hadn't been in this area for a very long time. And I have tremendous pride in this community, and I moved back here to be with my family, around them, and I want to have great things for my kids. I feel more than proud to be able to stay here for my grandchildren and hopefully great-grandchildren and have this be a beacon despite the challenges that we've had. And so that's really what my commitment is here for the community, and I'm very proud of this community. But I do have one question for you. You did have a range in terms of what the bond proposal is. Do we have multiple bids on this, or what stage are we at with this?
Yep, so what will happen in that process is we work with a number of companies that we've worked with for a number of years, and we'll put the process out to bid, and we'll have a number of firms that will bid on it. But in order to put together a plan that's really, when you design something as complex as a new high school, it's more about total square footage, and then what's inside of it takes months and months to kind of ferret out what it's going to look like. But you've got to put something on paper that can be put out to bid to the public that other companies can bid on. So when we're looking around, like I said, the end of February to make the final announcement of what the plan will be, put it out to bid, and there's a board policy that determines how long that will take. And we'll have other companies that have the opportunity to submit proposals for us, and the board will make a decision based on that. So my guess is probably in the March-April range, depending on when this announcement is ultimately made. Great question. And to speak to a couple things you said, when I first came here, I had a very similar feeling for the community. My parents retired here a little over a decade ago. I took my ACT test at Lapeer East High School and had lunch with my dad at Bryan's afterwards, and took my driver's test at the Secretary of State in Lapeer, and I've got nieces and nephews that go to school here. So Lapeer is a special place, and I too heard, have lived south of Lapeer, and I've heard a lot of people that are taking a second look at districts like Lapeer because we're reinvesting into education. And so I've had many conversations with people like the city manager, Chamber of Commerce folks, interested business leaders in the community about, is it the chicken or the egg? Do we wait for this mass migration north and then build the school district that meets the needs of those families? Or does the school district take the lead, build, to use your word, a beacon of a school district that attracts these people, or at least doesn't push them away and allows them to give Lapeer a second look? That football complex, in and of itself, doesn't represent a whole lot. It's a football field. But if you don't pass the drive-by test, no one's coming back to take a second look. The second year here, walking into a Lapeer West High School, Linden High School football playoff game. It was a 1 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday. I'm walking behind two Linden dads, and we're walking down the track, looking at the field. The one Linden guy looks at the other Linden dad and says, man, this place is a real piece of you-know-what. And literally in that moment, I was absolutely mortified, number one. Number two, more convicted than ever that facilities matter, okay? I have dozens of examples, dozens of athletes, of band kids, of average kids that aren't involved in anything, that have shown up to things that we host, like our Opportunity Night, which is basically a night at our high school where we just put on display everything our district offers, that have come to that stuff and said, I'm coming here. Kids that are transferring districts because of those opportunities, because their kid can get 50 credits of dual enrollment paid for, because they can play on one of the best football fields in the state, because they can be part of one of the best bands in the state of Michigan, which we also have. Right? These are things that matter to people. And so if we want to grow the community in recognition of the demographic issues that you very accurately pointed out, someone has to be the leader. My preference is it's the school district. But it can't be a plan that's, hey, give me $500 million. It's got to be something that's legitimate.
On the first proposal, I saw Turl was going to remain as the year-round school.
Yes.
But I didn't see that in the last one.
Great question. So what's going to happen is the year-round program is going to be an option for all families, kindergarten to 8th grade. And we currently operate a school within a school model right now at Rowan Warner and Zemmer. So for example, at RW and Zemmer, we have some students on a year-round calendar. We have some students on a traditional calendar. That same option will be available in all 4 of these buildings. So the year-round program will exist at the Early Childhood Center. Some students and families will select it, some will not. Right? So the year-round option will be available for all families in those 4 buildings as we currently operate at K through 8 now.
Well, Matt, listen, I've known you a long time, since before we actually had come to the district. And I know that when you got here, you turned what was a district that was losing, that was on set to lose, being in the whole $8 million, you turned that around. So I have immense respect for you personally. But there is another side to this. Currently, Lapeer School still is in the hock for 41.9, I believe it was on the FOIA.
Yep.
Just shy of $42 million that we still owe for the previous bond.
Yep.
My concern is, and this is not a reflection on you. It truly isn't.
Yep.
But I worked on the bond committee, part of the 07 bond. We worked hard selling that. Now we're looking at Lynch, who had not only bond money, probably close to $1 million in bond money put in it, but it also had $2.7 million put in sinking fund.
Yep.
To my knowledge, Attica Elementary was the most they sold at. They got $175,000.
Yeah.
I paid, and many other people, and they probably your relatives, paid taxes to get that in. And you say, and I don't doubt that you're sincere in your beliefs about the proposals, but I'm hugely concerned about where we're going to be sitting. We're talking the Lapeer Community Schools sitting at a total bond indebtedness of 120 to 140 million, based on where the final numbers land. So I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about where we are at. I just saw in the paper we've got a new condominium complex. I as well get all over the county. There's a lot of building. Almont's got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
People are finding good times again, so they're looking at Lapeer County and coming out, and moving out this way. I guess just how can you make a guy like me feel comfortable with the indebtedness? Because it's an awful lot of money. We're looking at when we close these buildings. We're not necessarily, and I got from the district today, I went on and was looking at the capacity of each building and where it sits. There are other options. We could do a sinking fund to help pay for some of these things, and yes, we could close buildings. My concern is that if we will close them. No, I understand, and that's fine. But when nobody's talked about, we had a sinking fund that was used for making repairs on the district, and
I understand your question.
From 03 to 08, I believe, is when that was in effect.
Yep.
So there are other options, and I guess we are kind of in a flux right now. We're looking at things could be changing. We're looking at some best times we've seen in this county in 10 to 15 years. And if you look at those numbers, there have been bumps, but we get more people out here, it could make a big difference. And so I guess, is there anything you can say that might
Bill, I've been trying to convince you for 8 years. How am I going to do it in the next 4 minutes?
Well, no, you understand what I'm saying.
I do. Let me answer it. The reason, and I understand and appreciate the total indebtedness question, because you can't look at this in a silo, which is why I included the total numbers, okay? The numbers that you quoted about Lynch are accurate. So, and you realize why those millions were put into the remaining elementary facilities, right? Because the strategic plan in 2002 and 3 and 4 called for, at the community's behest, the removal of the district's portables, right? They did not want the portables outside all these buildings. It was an eyesore, not to mention not best for kids. The remaining elementary facilities were not large enough to house the population of students that would enter those buildings when the portables were closed. So that money was spent not because the district sat around and said, well, let's spend a couple $1 million in sinking fund dollars, but because with the restructuring of the portables, we didn't have enough space. Now the question becomes your option, which is the sinking fund option. Okay, so let's spend $40 million, $30 million. okay? And that will put us at a total of excess of $80 million in total indebtedness. And then I'll close those buildings in the next 8 to 10 years. So you'll be sitting in that same chair with the next superintendent in 10 years, because it probably won't be me, right? And you'll have the exact same question. And you'll be right to ask it, although if I was sitting in the back, I'd yell at you because I'll say, you said that was your idea 8 years ago when Wandrie was here, okay? So let's be a total of $80 million in indebtedness in buildings that I guarantee will close, or let's spend a little bit more and put them into facilities that are going to house the entirety of the district for the next 50 years. I don't have a better argument than that. I also look at, and I'm not one of these guys that I call it the crisis of comparison. Well, you know, look at those guys. We're doing better than them. I'm not saying that, but you have to look at these numbers, Bill, as a frame of reference. When you look at total indebtedness, we're doing pretty darn good. No, I'm not. I'm talking, there's Genesee County schools up there. Okay, so hold on, Bill, hold on. We've had this debate and privately, so let's have it publicly. Because you want me to compare us to Dryden and Emily City because they're in Lapeer County?
No, I'm talking, Oakland County did not go through the same unemployment issues. They didn't have 26, 28% unemployment issue like we did here in Lapeer County.
Okay, they didn't, but they're still closing schools as well.
No, I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I hate to, and we have mentioned this before. My worry is we close buildings. A building that we're going to sell for $175,000, 5 years goes through, and we have to open up if we don't have to.
What do you think I could get for Zemmer and Rowan Warner right now? Our newest facilities. What could I sell them on the open market for right now?
You better not sell them brand new.
You know what I mean. Those are brand new facilities, updated a decade ago, right? We put how many millions of dollars into those facilities? What could I sell those buildings for in the open market today? It's a false equivalency. Okay? If you put a brand new kitchen in your house and spend $50,000 to do it, and you wait a requisite number of years, not only will you get that money back, but you'll add a value to your home, which makes that investment a sound one. When you build a school, what can you use it for? A school. Okay? Or a church, which is what we do. Or we sell it to the township building. So unless the Mott Foundation comes in and says, Matt, I want to give you $40 million for Zemmer, you know what I get for that building? About $500,000. So you can't use that argument to say, just because you spent $20 million to renovate it and now it's not worth that in the open market. None of them are.
Avondale Schools, where I graduated from, they did the same thing. They wiped out, they closed a number of their elementary buildings. The Chrysler Tech Center came in. Their school enrollment went back up to 4,500 kids. Guess what they were rebuilding? But instead of the schools that they had, they were paying, $8, $10, $12 million for each elementary building. So I guess what is the maximum capacity under this situation? Yeah. What is the maximum capacity? And what kind of safety valve and check valve do you have if need be? What reservoir do we have to put extra kids without having to pay?
That is a really good question. We still own Crampton. We still own Maple Grove. I will probably not sell all 4 elementary schools simultaneously. We still own ASC, which can be converted to elementary school. And we'll have 4 buildings in the east site, the west site, Rowan Warner, and Zemmer, that those 4 buildings can house a total of, somebody add this up for me, 1,800 plus 1,500 plus 1,500. What is that total? 48? Almost 5,000. That's our current population right now, right? In 2022-23, when we open the doors, our population will be around between 4,000 and 4,500 students. So we're building, the buildings will have the capacity for the current students. So if we lose 1,000 and gain 1,000, which nothing demographically outside of a Chrysler Tech Center example, nothing demographically in the last 40 years indicates that's what happens. What I have to do is, in review of the most recent and relevant data, make a decision on what's best for us now. I've been here 8 years. I've been looking back since the 90s of what's happening demographically in here. Not one piece of data. Not just the data that I'm looking at. We hire professional demographers to come in and say, is the data we're looking at legitimate and accurate based on how we do projections? Every single year, the audit comes back clean and they say yes. So I can sit there and say, I'm not going to make a decision because Chrysler Tech Center might come in and build these, which would be a great problem to have for us. But even the total indebtedness, if we did an $80 million project, doesn't compare to this. And I don't care what county it's in. They're still being levied at 8 mills, 12 mills, 6.5 mills. We'll still be less than 5.
That's pretty darn good.
Not a question, just a statement. Brad Hagedon, I currently serve as a trustee on the Board of Education with Jan Peabody. And there's just 2 points, because you said to make you feel comfortable, you know, with what's going on. In the spring of 2016, we refinanced the 2007 bond. And I don't remember the...
$6 million we saved on it.
Thank you. So we're, even down the road, we're going to do our due diligence to save this community money. My girlfriend and I both graduated in 2014 from Lapeer West. We've chosen to live here in Lapeer for the same reasons that everybody in this room has mentioned, right? Great community, low taxes. I don't want to be paying for them just as much as you do, believe me. But we're going to do our due diligence, unlike prior administrations. I'm sure you remember 2005, we failed. 2006, we failed. 2007, we passed. We're taking our time to do this right. And I appreciate this administration doing that. That's my only points I want to make. Thank you.
You're closing Murphy, right? Yes. Okay. My concern with that community and anything south of 69, all the way to Hadley, is that the expression I've heard from them is that they feel disenfranchised from the community of Lapeer. And they're very, very upset about that. They've had a lot of investment in that element too, and they feel that they now are really at a, because you closed one in Hadley in the past. Yep. And and the people in Metamora, you know, large tract homeowners and so forth, they relied upon that Murphy as one of their mainstays. So if you could maybe address that.
You know, closing an elementary building in a neighborhood is probably one of the most difficult undertakings any superintendent, board, or community can engage in, because there's such a sense of community around it. Murphy in particular, because of the distance away from town. A lot of folks that live in the south end of the county live closer to downtown Oxford. They shop at the Meyer on 24 in Oxford, and they don't even come to downtown Lapeer, and other kids are in middle school and high school. The disenfranchisement that they feel from Lapeer, the city of, I really can't speak to that. I couldn't say that I know why. From a school district perspective, it is very difficult to be held hostage in making these challenging decisions based on sentiments like that. So I'll give you an example. So Maurice, I stood up in front of about 250 people in the Seton cafeteria 7 years ago, and was told that if we closed Seton Elementary School, it would be the collapse of the district, that a majority of those community members would head west to Davison. We would lose hundreds and hundreds of kids, and it would basically spell the death knell of Lapeer schools. I took that to heart. I listened to those concerns, I listened to those folks, and I made the decision anyway, because in the face of really solid data, I can appreciate the emotion, I can appreciate the sentiment, and not to sound cold-hearted, but I have to make the decisions for this school district with the best data and best information collected. The day that we begin to allow the emotionality of these issues to consume us and to be the primary driver and motivator for making decisions, we're going to make unsound decisions, in my estimation. So what does that mean? Do we reach out to Murphy? Do we reach out to Metamora and explain why this program we think is the best? Absolutely. So I run into the same barriers you do. 50% of the people at any given time love what we're doing. The other half, they don't. Okay? That is the nature of any leadership position. So we have to do a really good job in the face of all the demographic information that you've articulated to challenge them. I can tell you this. I felt the exact same fear when I met with the Murphy PTC parents the first time about a month and a half ago. I said, man, my wife said, what's your day look like? I said, I'm about to go get my butt chewed at Murphy. She goes, all right, good luck with that. I went to Murphy, about 25 moms in a library. Did this little spiel, the abridged version. Sorry, Kevin, they got the shorter version that night. Sat down. I said, what questions do you have? The first mom raises her hand and says, why is it taking so long? Why can't we do it sooner? Why do we got to wait till 2022, 23? It was the most positive group of parents of any building I visited in the last 2.5 months. Because when people can be convinced, given the right data, and they can be explained to and sold that, yes, I love Murphy, yes, I love Metamora, And I would love nothing more than to keep that building open. And so would I. Let's just take that issue off the table. I don't want to close any schools. Like, I want to open schools. I'd like to attend more ribbon cutting ceremonies and building closures. Trust me. Okay, the wrecking ball is not as fun as the ribbon cuttings. Okay, I love to give people raises. I would like to have all these programs and limitless amounts of money, but that isn't the reality. That just isn't the reality. But that doesn't mean that we bury our head and say we can't have a great education system because we don't have enough money. We don't have the same money they have in Oakland County. Well, I have worked in Oakland County school districts. Okay, I've worked in Wayne County school districts. I've worked in multiple areas in the state, and there isn't one district that I would say that I think is better than this one right here. Not one. I wouldn't do it. I mean, that's why I'm here. That's why this is the district that I choose to lead, because I really believe in this community. So I know the demographic information. I know what they think, and I'm going to take the case to them, and we're going to get a yes vote. We're going to make it happen. There's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind.
Thank you, Matt. Listen, this is some heated issues, and I know everybody's got a lot of questions and stuff. Matt, will you hang out for a while afterwards and maybe answer some questions? Okay, we got a few more things to talk about here. Thank you for the questions, folks. And again, he's going to be around, so if you got some more questions,